I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're exploring a love story unlike any other, one written in faith, and even the forces of nature. We're talking to a terrific author. His name is Albert L. Clark, and he has penned a powerful book. It is called Lightning and Thunder. In the book, he takes us on a journey through his miraculous love affair with his wife, a romance that defied logic at times and spanned decades. From love at first sight to the lightning strike that marked her passing, this is a true story of destiny, devotion, and the power of the unexplained. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Bookside Press for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The link is below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Albert, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Talked to you once before on a different book, and I'm going to be talking to you again at 1 o'clock on another book. So,
Okay, well, we're looking forward to that next interview, and I enjoyed talking to you last time. This book is truly amazing. It's a wonderful love story about your wife. Take us back to the moment you first saw your wife.
okay, well, my parents had taken when I was 12 years old. My parents took me to see uh, Disney uh, Disney Land in California,
Mhm.
and my wife that I hadn't known, her parents took her from Wisconsin to Disneyland on the same day. And since I had a younger brother, my parents were, with him, and I just roamed the park by myself. And I was approaching a ride, and I saw this girl that I fell in love with instantly. That was arguing with her brother that she wasn't tall enough to ride on the ride, and her older brother wasn't going to go on that childish ride. So I heard that much of the conversation, and he was wearing an Arkansas T-shirt. So I figured, well, she's from Arkansas. Well, that's not very far from Oklahoma, which is where I grew up and went to school.
Mhm.
And anyway, I fell in love with her. Well, somehow I got separated. They disappeared, and I kept seeing her platinum blonde hair next to a taller, 6 foot tall brother.
Mhm.
Uh, Going through the crowd, but I couldn't catch up with him because I'd lose them in the huge crowds at Disneyland. And then I'd see a flash of her blonde hair again, and never did catch up with her. When I got old enough to drive, I drove over to Arkansas trying to see if there's some by chance I would see her. And it didn't work, of course. There are millions of people in Arkansas, and the odds of finding her are zero. So, anyway, when I came back from the war in Southeast Asia, I got assigned to a base in Arkansas, and I
Mhm.
moved into an apartment house. And during a lightning storm, which is where the part of the name of the book comes from, lightning. Uh, and in a flash of lightning, I saw her standing 2 apartments down on the balcony that was shared like a old style motel. It has a long balcony that covers
Mhm.
all the rooms. So I walked down there and said, "Let's get married." She said, "What?" And I said, "Let's get married." And so she went into her apartment and locked the door. So
So
anyway,
you saw her at Disney World and fell in love with her at love at first sight. Did you ride on the ride with her that day?
no, I wanted to ask her if her brother would let me
Thank
escort
you.
her on the ride because actually she was 2 months older than I am,
Uh-huh.
but she was short.
Right.
And when she reached her full growth, she was still stretching to hit 5 foot.
Amazing. Now, how many years later did you see her on this balcony?
14 years.
14 years later. How old are you now at 14 years later?
I was 26 and she
26
was
years
20.
old. You see this girl, you'd only seen her once before in your life, and you recognize her?
Right. In a
Um,
flash of lightning.
Amazing, amazing. Did she recognize you as the guy from Disney World?
No, she never saw me.
Amazing,
It
amazing.
just that in talking later as we started dating, I explained that I had seen her at Disneyland, and she course, didn't have any memory. She remembered standing by that ride, arguing with her brother that she wanted to go on the ride, but
Amazing.
she never saw me.
That's amazing. So you saw her when you were very young. You're 26 years old. You see her, you say, let's get married. And she's got kind of like scared by that and went inside, right?
Right.
So
After
how did you
this,
get to the point of asking her out to go out on a date and start dating her?
I stalked her. Well, actually, a couple of weeks later, Miss America was going to be on television, and she went down and bought a small color television, and then which very few people had a color television back then,
Mhm.
and it was like a 19-inch or smaller TV. But anyway, she invited all the people, all the single people in the apartment, to come down to her apartment and watch Miss America, which I was a member of. I was a group of, just everybody in the apartment house. And I went there early to help her set up, get the drinks, get the whiskey and the gin and everything out where people could get to it. Um, and I thought she was a very poor girl at the time because her quote sofa was a aluminum army cot with a big thick piece of foam rubber on top, and then she had sewn a cover for it and pillows for it to make it look like a sofa. Her coffee table was a shipping box for some kind of fruit. It was made out of wood and had a piece of
Amazing.
plywood on top. And her dining room table was a card table with two metal chairs.
Amazing. Well, she was very resourceful, that's for sure. So
Right. Well,
26, go
I
ahead.
didn't know that her parents were very wealthy.
Hmm. Amazing. Amazing. So how many years did you date before you got married?
Uh, Almost a year.
Hmm.
Um, she broke up with me once when I was sitting in her apartment with the door open watching television, and the neighbor that lived between us in the apartment house in the intervening apartment uh, came rushing in full uniform and said, "Why are you not at the base?" And I said, "Why should I be at the base?" "Well, there's an airplane coming in with nuclear on it." And I said, "That's not me. That's nuclear. That's radioactive iodine for the hospital. It's
Hmm.
not a nuclear weapon." Well, at that, she refused to talk to me for 2 weeks because she didn't know I had anything to do with nuclear weapons. Hey, it was a SAC base, Strategic Air
Right.
Command bomber base. She thought it was training base. She didn't realize there were nuclear weapons there. And my name was signed for all those nuclear weapons. So I was responsible for the inventory. So
Amazing.
anyway, uh, within a couple of days later, I got a emergency notice to go on a government trip for 6 weeks to Denver, Colorado. While I was gone, she had a change of heart, and when I came back, uh, you know, whole different attitude. In that
Mhm.
she realized she loved me, and I loved her, and she would just never, ever, ever ask about what I did ever again. So for 45 years, my job was secret.
Amazing. Amazing. So you were married for 45 years.
Right. And every
Amazing.
time I would go traveling, a lot of the travel I took was the most senior civilian on a major base like Wright-Patterson, which is 30,000 employees. The
Hmm.
senior civilian could not ask where I was going when a general would tell me to go down and pick up tickets. Go wherever the ticket said to go and look up General so and so, and he would tell me why I'm there. So
Amazing.
I so nobody except for the general that told me to go uh, at that 30,000 member base knew where I was or how long I was going to be gone. And when I'd come back, I'd have to explain to my supervisor that I didn't use her travel money. That was somebody else's travel money that I traveled on, and I can't tell you what I did or where I was. So, which doesn't help your performance appraisal
Yeah.
when you've got
Amazing.
five layers of supervision that can't know where you were.
Amazing. Such an amazing story that you fell in love with her at Disneyland and it was love at first sight. And then 14 years later, you see her during a lightning strike and you see her on the balcony. You reunite, you date. A year later, you're married. You're married for 45 years. And at one point, you actually feel that there was divine intervention in your relationship, right?
Well, just finding her again was the first divine intervention.
Yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, I got assigned to a German Luftwaffe base, not an American base in Germany, but a German air base. And so we moved there, and I had a very high clearance, but I didn't, to handle nuclear weapons, but I didn't have the high enough clearance for the job I was going to do there. So I couldn't even go to into work. So I had just bought a car with the help of some people there at the base that had connections to get me a Porsche 911 really cheap.
Hmm.
And so we drove over to Paris and had reservations at a small 20-room hotel on a one-way street in Paris that was not too far from the Louvre. But I had no idea where it was. Of course, I'd never been driving in Europe before. So
Hmm.
we drove over to Paris, and I couldn't even find a street sign. So we decided to get off the main road and just try and get off and find a parking space. And we'd walk to a corner to find a street sign because the street signs were posted 15, 20 feet up on the wall of the building. And I could see them in the rearview mirror, but yeah, I couldn't possibly read them when they're in the rearview mirror. And we couldn't find a sign facing us. So obviously, I need to park the car and get out and walk to a corner to be able to find a street sign to figure out where we were and how to get to the hotel. So I tried turning twice and somebody cut me off and I couldn't turn. So I turned at the Third Street and there was a parking garage sign immediately within a block, underground parking garage. So I went into the underground parking garage, found an empty space right by some stairs to walk up to the street and parked the car. We walked up to the street to go find a street sign
Hmm.
and discovered we were 20 feet from the front door of the hotel. We had the nearest parking space.
Wow, wow. That's divine intervention to find a parking spot like that in a big city, no doubt. That's wonderful. Tell us about the lightning strike and your wife's passing. The relationship kind of rekindled again with a lightning strike, and then there was another lightning strike. Tell us about that.
Okay. She had an allergic, it was a case of bad medical records to start with. Uh, we were on a cruise ship and we danced for 2 hours to the rock and roll band on Saturday night, and the cruise came back Sunday. And Monday she was the maid of honor at a wedding, uh, and that Friday she went into the grocery store to buy some fresh rolls to have with dinner with the newly married couple. And she got blocked in by non-English speaking people with their shopping carts in the flower aisle, which was huge. And when I found her, she was holding on to the table that has all these cut flowers. It's maybe 15 feet long and 10 feet wide. And she was holding on to that to keep from falling to the floor. And I physically shoved people and their shopping carts out of the way to get to her. And I took her straight to the hospital. And the hospital records claimed that she was bedbound for 9 years with a home nurse and home oxygen. So she was dying anyway. And I said, that's not true. And she had a living will that said, don't ever put her on life support because she had asthma.
Mhm.
And she was always afraid that somebody would put her on a ventilator when all she needed was an epinephrine shot
Mhm.
and an ordinary breathing treatment.
Mhm.
So that's what happened. They put her on a ventilator and killed her.
Yeah.
So she stayed alive for 15 days. They because of overdosing her, because when they recorded her death, they said she was 5'4". Remember, she had to stretch to be 5 foot with
Yeah.
shoes on.
Yeah.
And she weighed 106 pounds. They said she weighed 145 pounds. So they overdosed her on all kinds of medicines and put her on a ventilator. And of course, they tried to give her the medicines to paralyze her so she wouldn't fight the
Yeah.
ventilator, and overdosed, of course. And uh, her heart stopped a few hours later in the emergency in the ICU, and a nurse brought her back. And uh, the next morning, she seemed to be okay, but she was wanting that tube pulled out of her mouth.
Yeah.
And I told the doctors that's what I wanted. He said, well, I can't do it. I'll go get some help. Well, he never came back. That was her primary care doctor. And so after a few hours, she started motion for me to go find a doctor. So I did. When I came back 30 minutes later without finding a doctor, without finding any doctor, the doctor had come in and put her in a coma, an induced coma. 15 days later, her kidneys had failed because of overdosing and all kinds of stuff they did wrong. And she took, they finally said she was brain dead. So they took her off the oxygen. And so she's just laying there breathing. And after about 36 hours of that, her blood pressure started dropping. Her oxygen levels started dropping from 98% without oxygen. And I leaned over and gave her a kiss and said, they say you're brain dead. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I'll see you in heaven.
Beautiful.
And with that, she went, when she let out the last breath, the whole hospital shook like it was an earthquake. And there was a big boom of thunder. We didn't know it was lightning storm. We couldn't hear anything in the hospital except for that great big boom. And all the power went out. Every bit of the power in the hospital went out. And 3 minutes later, the battery backups for the life monitors and so forth came back on and showed her flatlined. So I went out and told the nurses, and the nurses station still was rebooting. It still hadn't come on to show she was gone. And 3 minutes later, the battery backup came on and showed her flatlined. And I went out to the nurse's station and said, "Well, you've killed her," and I left.
Well,
anyway, I went down there 2 months later to sell my house in Florida and moved to Oklahoma to be with my kids that had stayed here when we went to Florida for 11 years. And they had it, when I drove by the hospital deliberately, and they had an 18-wheeler generator sitting hooked up to an 18-wheeler fuel truck with a great big power line going into the hospital to provide power to the hospital 2 months after that event.
Amazing. Your wife
who
left
knows
this...
how many people? Who knows how many people died in the hospital that day because of lack of power? But I took it as God's revenge on the hospital.
Yeah, exactly. Amazing. Your love story reignited with a lightning strike. Her life ended with a lightning strike. They say lightning doesn't strike twice, but sometimes it does. And I think it's so symbolic of the wonderful love story that you've detailed in this amazing book and described for us today. Folks at home, the name of the book is Lightning and Thunder. In the book, Albert takes us on a journey through his miraculous love affair with his beautiful wife, a romance that seemed to defy logic at times and spanned decades, from love at first sight at Disneyland to the lightning strike that marked her passing. This is a true story of destiny, devotion, and the power of the unexplained. Albert, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Well, say everywhere we went, it was a miracle. We could go to Grand Canyon during tourist season, and they'd tell us, "Oh, gee, you did make reservations last year if you wanted to stay here." And we'd drive in to make a U-turn to drive back out, and some college students ran out and said, "Hey, we didn't realize how big these campsites are. We rented 3 of them, and we've got 7 cars and 7 tents in one campsite. Would you like one of ours?" Okay.
Amazing. Amazing.
So,
You guys were blessed. You're blessed. The biggest blessing of all was that you found each other and that you
right.
had basically a half a century together. And I know you will be reunited with her in heaven. And I know you've got an angel who looks down on you every day. Albert, I appreciate your time here today. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.